Welcome to the second part of our heritage talk on uncovering Coleshill.
So Stuart's going to join me now, hopefully, and we're going to have a little bit more of a look about what's happening in these maps and how that relates to the archaeology that we've found. So the evaluation trenches that we can see here, they're actually the red lines overlaid onto the map itself, and then we can pick out these kind of big black lines. So we actually picked up a couple of parts of the manor during the evaluation, and it's actually that evaluation information that informs our next phase now. So if we can have a look at the next slide, please. Hopefully, Stu, you can talk to us a little bit about the phasing.
Yeah, so when we did the evaluation, we found quite a lot of exciting features, both internally from where the moat is, which you can see in the blue, and externally. So if you first look at all the dark green lines in the south of the image, so that's actually structures within the moat that looks to be the manor house itself. So what we found there is two key phases. We found an earlier phase, which we believe is medieval, which appeared to be made out of sandstone, posts and clay pads. So what you get is you have clay pads around this size, probably about the size of a football, and you have them spread out along a line. And within those clay pads, you put horizontal wooden timbers, and they form the foundations of the house. And into those horizontal timbers, you put vertical ones to help build the house up. So we think we found that right in the centre of that area. But then to the outside of that, we also found Elizabethan walls, which were really, really substantial. We're talking sort of 1-metre deep foundations, whereas the foundations for the medieval building were a lot smaller. They were only sort of 20 centimetres down, not deep at all. So we could see from that there was there was 2 phases already, and that gave us a good indication that not only did we have an Elizabethan house, we might have something a lot earlier as well. And what we also found was extensive Elizabethan gardens. So again, if you look at where the moat is, and then the orange or the yellow and purple lines that form a cross, so that's our Elizabethan gardens. Now they're really obvious on this and in the GPR results from the geophysics, but in the ground as well, they're really clear. And when we put the trenches across, you could still see the gravel, you could still see where the family of the Digby and the de Montforts were walking along. You could see where Lady Lettice used to walk around her garden, but that was only kind of a snippet of what is to come in the mitigation. But what we also found is that there were different areas within this. So to the right-hand side of this inner gardens, we believed we might have found evidence of a kind of a herb garden. In the central area, we believe we found box hedges, evidence of trees, and a really nice formal ornamental garden. And then to the left, we believe we found vegetable patches. But this is all still to be confirmed and something that we're starting to look at now. But then again, looking at the map, so externally to the blue moat and on the western side, what we found is even more extensive Elizabethan gardens. And what we hope to find at this point, now we're going through to the mitigation, is potentially fish ponds or fountains, that when you look out of your house, you look down this amazing avenue out into your gardens, and at the end you might see a fountain, or you might have seen fish ponds, and it would have been lined with trees, with hedges, and that's what we're looking at now, we're hoping to find.
It sounds very, very ornate. So I think mentioning a bit about the herb garden is really interesting, because we do hear in a lot of perhaps literature from the period how important those posies of herbs were for medicinal purposes. So it really kind of feeds into this as a very, very lively and vibrant household, and it's kind of sustaining itself on the land as well. So let's look on to the next slide, please, Tash. So Stu, this is actually one of the images that you've taken on site. It was just last week, wasn't it? So could you explain to us what we're seeing here?
So this is really, really exciting. So something that Emma just touched on a minute ago was the pavilions that were on site and were late to move to Ettington. And what you can see here is my colleague Rob slowly troweling back an area of foundations, which are within the internal area of the moat and are probably the foundations of one of the pavilions that we see. So the image that we looked at a couple of minutes ago, that was probably placed where Rob is troweling at the moment. So all the brickwork we believed is collapsed in foundations and remnants left over from when the pavilion was there. But if you look closely on the right hand side of the image, you'll see sort of an area of gravel as opposed to a ground soil. That gravel is one of the Elizabethan gravel footpaths around the gardens. So what would happen is you'd leave your house, you'd go for a walk around your garden, and at the end of the garden you'd have these two pavilions which you'd be able to sit in, you'd be able to entertain guests, you'd be able to look out over your gardens and everything that you own. But what's really exciting is Rob has managed to actually find quite a few smoking pipes that have all been broken up now. But it shows that what was happening is they were coming out into the garden, coming to their pavilion, and probably just having a nice afternoon with a pipe and smoking and having a really great time. So it's really exciting because we're not just getting foundations, we can already start building up the lives of the people that were here. And these gravel footpaths, what's really exciting is you don't normally get the level that the people used to walk on that we excavate and we try and understand. So normally you strip the ground back and sort of their level that they would walk on has been destroyed, it's not there anymore. But what we have here is the actual, yeah. So we have the actual gravel footpaths that they walked on. So that gravel footpath, you can just imagine Lady Latif's, the Digby family, walking up and down, going to their pavilion, having a great time with friends.
Who owns it?
It is. So this is still the early stages of it, looking at the pavilions. And at this stage where I took the photos, we'd only uncovered one of them. But quite brilliantly, we've now found the second one as we've continued our strip. So we do now have both pavilions within the internal area of the moat.
There you are, hot off the press. We also have a couple more pictures on site. So we go on to the next slide, please. So Stu, it looks quite kind of red and mucky here, and I can perhaps point out maybe a structure. What is it that we can see?
So you can see quite a lot going on here, and you really need to get your eyes into it. So where Amy, my colleague, is cleaning up at the moment, that is actually the medieval and Elizabethan Manor House. And although it's quite hard to pick out now, there's actually multiple phases going on here. So the wall that you can see on the left-hand side, towards the left where the grass is, there's a large sandstone block, and that's probably evidence of an earlier manor, but we're still not 100% sure, we still need to check this. But slightly further to the right, there's red bricks. Now these red bricks, they're early red bricks, but they're not particularly recent. So we think they're Elizabethan bricks, potentially Tudor, so we're looking really at early red bricks that you get. And it looks like these red bricks have been placed on top of the sandstone with a different kind of mortar, which indicates there's a couple of different phases. And then what you can also see is in sort of the bottom quarter of the photo, it's a much darker soil. But where Amy's working, there's a much lighter, redder soil. Now, that's really interesting because in some cases, we're finding that the walls aren't actually there anymore. And it might be the case that the stone's been robbed out or the walls were never there. It might be a case that the building was built from timber, so that timber is no longer there because it's rotted away. But what we're left with is almost a ghost of the manor house. So these different colours are indicating where the different rooms are. So where Amy's working at the moment, we believe it's one of the wings to the house. And it looks like that every time they've added a bit onto the manor house, so you would start with maybe a great hall, and over time you would add different sections onto it. So you might add a wing, you might add a kitchen, you might add like a back section to the house. But it looks like every time they do this, what they put in the ground as a basic foundation is different. So what we're looking at is different foundation grounds between the walls. So this would have been under the floorboards, and just shows that although we don't have the walls in some areas, we can still look at different formation processes and look at how the phasing works and which wings might have been added on at what times. Now, what, again, we can't see at the moment is we've managed to now expose nearly all the manor house itself. And what we looked at in the evaluation is that we had these two distinct phases. So we had the earlier phase with the sandstone bricks and then with the wooden timbers, and then a later phase, which was probably Elizabethan with the red bricks. Now that seems to be the case with the full strip and the full area that we've excavated. And what we found is the front of the house that faces onto the Birmingham Road, which would be to the east, that looks a lot older, and it looks like there's been a facade put on the front, made out of Tudor bricks, Elizabethan bricks. So it looks like it's kind of what you get now. So you have a modern house, and then you might put pabbledash on the front because as times change, styles change. So it looks like we have an earlier core of a house that has then had a frontage put on, which would be more in keeping with the style at the time that that was done. But at the rear of the house, we have a massive extension put on with massive Elizabethan walls. So what we're seeing is an earlier structure with multiple phases and multiple wings being added on as they're spending more money in the house. And an early indication or an early thought that we have is that potentially when the Digbys do take over the house, that they don't want to really be associated with the de Montforts. And then they start putting different things onto the house. They start adding different wings. They add an extension to the back. And that might just be to show now that it's their house. So they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to do what they want to the house. And they want to make it theirs. But around this time is when we think we see the gardens developing. So what you have is these substantial walls and substantial extensions being added onto the house. And then you suddenly see the gardens being turned into these amazing Elizabethan complexes with avenues and box gardens. A lot of this is what we're kind of assuming at the moment and what we've seen. We're going to be looking at this over the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll find out a bit more. And again, so going back to the photo, just to the left of Amy is where we believe we might have found evidence of the Great Hall of the house. So this is kind of, again, hot off the press, and we still need to confirm it. But what we're seeing is a much earlier structure within the internal side and potentially a half within the middle. So hopefully when we can come back and do another webinar in the future, I can confirm this. But we do look like we have some really early stuff going on as well.
That's really exciting. And the Great Hall is actually something that we're going to be looking at later in our 3D reconstruction. But let's go on to, I think we've got one final image of the site, and then we'll maybe look at some of the artifacts themselves. So Stu, looking at this picture, it kind of looks like a giant muddy tortoise is in the ground with some wood around it. What are we looking at?
So this is actually in the bottom of the moat that we have. So what we're doing at the moment is we're currently stripping off the grass and the topsoil from around the moat so we can have a better look at it before we go down any deeper into it. But we've had a real surprise, and on one of the arms of the moat, we found this wooden revetment going around the bottom of it. Now, everyone on site already has an idea of what it might be for. We still don't really know. But what we suspect is that when they've constructed the moat, they've dug a narrow channel around the outside and put in wooden posts and beams into it just to help shore up the moat itself and the banks on the edge. But we don't really know at the moment, and we weren't really expecting something like this. So this is really exciting. And something else to add to the story that we have. And what we're finding in the moat itself, we've put one section slot into the moat to have a look at its depth. We're seeing multiple levels. We're seeing recuts, so where you had the original moat and then it was dug out and cleaned, much like you get today with canals, where a canal fills up over time and then you just need to clear it out to get better use out of it. So we're not sure at the moment how this wood affects it, if the wood was put in right at the early start when the moat was first excavated, or it's a later addition when they've cleaned out the moat and they just needed to support the internal structures. But again, hopefully over the next couple of months we'll find out what's going on and we'll be able to report back.
Amazing. Brilliant. And let's go on to the next slide, please, Tash.
So this is exciting. So this is actually a photo in one of our moat slots. Now the moat at the moment is not continuous and it doesn't connect into the River Cole, and that's something that we're hoping to find out. But what we found during the evaluation is that in the forecourt in front of the Manor House, there's an earlier moat hidden beneath it. And what we found is this earlier moat has been covered over and backfilled in to create the forecourt in front of the Elizabethan house. And what my colleague Jed here is doing, he's actually cleaning up a red brick revetment holding up the forecourt against the moat. So as you look at this picture, the ground that's higher to the left, that's the forecourt in front of the house. And the ground that's sloping off to the right, that feeds into the moat. So what they've done is they've created this massive brick wall in the moat and then filled one side of it to create the gravel forecourt. At the moment, we don't know how deep this is going to go, and we're quite excited to find out, and we're getting some brilliant finds out of it already. And just where my other colleague digging behind Jed is, we've just found loads and loads of pieces of pottery that appear to have been thrown into the moat, including one that could still be not intact now, but one whole pot once we managed to put it back together. So we're getting some brilliant finds out of this. But what we've also found in this moat is something quite interesting. So really what we have is an octagonal moat, which we suspect probably connects to the River Cole, and this is something that we need to look into. But just past this photo, we have a really large ditch that seems to go 90 degrees off of the moat and shoots under the Elizabethan gardens. We don't really know what it is yet, but it used to have a beautiful arch over the top of it as almost an entranceway. And we don't know at the moment if this is just a ditch. It might not even be medieval. This could be something earlier, or if it's just a drain for the house. But this is something, again, really exciting. We just weren't expecting it. And this is something that we're going to look at and hopefully we can talk about in the future and see where it leads.
And is it big enough for a person to walk through?
It is. It's probably about the top of the arch. Probably would have been sort of 1.52 meters in height. We haven't excavated it to that full depth yet, but as the site works go on, we'll look at doing that. But unfortunately, at the moment, the top of the arch has collapsed in, but we can still see where it was, and we can still record it, and hopefully, we might be able to do some reinterpretations of it at a later date.
Fantastic.
How much longer do you expect to be on site, Stuart?
I think we're going to be here a couple more months for sure. We've got quite a lot of work to do, and the more we dig, the more we find. It's unbelievable how many finds we've got. You can just walk across site and you're picking up finds everywhere, and we're just getting a whole range of material. And what we're hoping is partly when we're looking at the Manor House itself and the different areas, so the different wings of the house and the different extensions, we might find pottery from different dates within these rooms. So we're hoping with the Great Hall, we're probably and hopefully find some medieval pottery in that area. But when we look at the back extension to the house, we might only find Elizabethan there, and that will help us kind of decide the dating. And that will indicate that the back of the house was Elizabethan because we don't have any medieval pot in there. So all these finds that we're finding are brilliant, and they're all helping us to start tell the story of what we have. And what we're finding as well is we're getting lots of smoking pipes that actually still have the seal on the bottom. And smoking pipes are really well datable, so we can track down where they've come from and get a really narrow date on where they were there or when they were found. So hopefully we can find out, not only that they were smoking, but where they're buying their pipes from and where they were buying their produce from.
Thank you for watching part 2 of our Heritage Talk on uncovering Coleshill.